I'm Thomas Mai.
And I'm Zane C. Weber.
The Craving Creativity podcast is our cry for help. A way to help ourselves as creatives to talk about how we get inspired, how we create, but also how we deal with stress, mental illness, and everything in between.
Now, if you're creative, you, like us, have most likely always been seen as the black sheep of your family and always making different choices than what 90% of normal people might do. Not going for the safe choice, but always living a little on the edge.
With the Craving Creativity podcast, it is our hope to create a safe space where we can talk about being creative. We want to build a community of like-minded creatives and help each other. Subscribe, email us, and be part of the creative journey. Welcome to Craving Creativity. This is episode 22. My name is Thomas Mai, and I'm one of the hosts together with my co-host,
Zane C. Weber.
And we made it to 22. And we're not going to lie, Zane, we had to reschedule this, 3-4 times?
I believe it was 3 times, but it was kind of like some significant rescheduling.
And that's because you've been busy and I've been busy and constant things just got in the way. And I've been the bad boy on this one. I had to push several times and I apologize. I Zane, I have to apologize again. But today we're doing it.
We're doing it. We're here.
We're on time, on schedule, getting one out once a week, which is awesome. If you're new to this podcast is all about how do we make a life being a creative and also still make money? And how do we not get stressed about not having money while still being creative? And those are the issues we're trying to solve. And today we want to talk about being a fan, how it contributes to creativity. Is that the right way of saying? Because you came up with this idea.
How being a fan can contribute to being a creative.
Okay.
So called creativity, your creative process.
Yeah.
Because it's very hard. I would say it's almost impossible to not consume media these days. Like whether you're on the internet or not, or whether you I relax by consuming media, whether it's video games or books or comics or movies.
Yeah.
That's part of my relaxation ritual. So it's and I, being a huge nerd, I always kind of rate whether I liked it or not.
Of course.
And so that's how I decide whether I'm a fan of something or not.
So you go in and you rate everything on sites or
on Letterboxd? I do rate every movie that I see. But usually just in discussions with friends about books or comics or TV shows or whatever.
So Letterboxd is
Letterboxd is it's kind of like a social media where you can log the movies that you're watching, movies that you're rewatching, what you rate the movies. You can write reviews for them, and you can see what your friends are doing as well.
And then you can go back anytime and see what you thought about something.
Absolutely. It gives you some very interesting statistics.
Maybe I should have started that about 1,000 films ago.
Well, it was very fun a couple of years ago when I first started just going through all the films that were listed and going, I've seen that one, I didn't like it. I saw that one and I love that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I should check it out. Okay, I'll put it in the show notes. Letterboxd. Okay, good.
So it is, so I find that when I'm creating something, it is almost intrinsic to, I've spoken about it on this podcast before, when I'm creating something, I almost immediately, my first step is to go and consume surrounding media. So particularly when I was directing The Producers, I watched every iteration of The Producers I could find so that I could work with the audience expectation of what
of course
was
anticipation
coming out.
And
and I think that definitely that definitely plays more into the theater where you're reproducing,
of course,
or you're reiterating a text rather than when you're creating something from scratch. But again, a lot of my personal podcasts have to do with reflections on media. I have a fan fiction podcast, which is not a particularly safe for work podcast. And I also have a Disney podcast where it was basically a debate podcast about which is the best Disney movie.
That's good. Should we link to these podcasts?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put them in the show notes.
Okay.
So I think it's a big part of my creative process is observing and analyzing what has come before me and what I enjoy in text and what I want to include in my own work.
So let me ask you, because you and I, right before we got on here, we have been talking about The Foundation, the new show from Apple TV. It's Asimov, is the name?
Asimov. Based on Isaac Asimov's work.
Exactly. And we both like it a lot. Okay, so let's talk about that. So the 10th episode just dropped. You watched it now. You like the whole thing. So what do you do now to? Do you do anything? You go in and rate it on Letterboxd, or you go share it, or what do you do?
Because it's a TV show, it's not on Letterboxd.
Okay. Okay.
But what I do for TV shows is usually I talk to my partner, I talk to my friends. I've spoken to you about it because you were the one that put me onto it, that was excited about it. Yeah. And you're the one that actually convinced me to stick with it, because after the 3rd episode, I wasn't a huge, huge fan.
I was. If one hasn't seen Foundation, it jumps in time period all the time, and it's very confusing.
Yeah.
It is very confusing. But once you understand that it's a grand universe that you have to see the story over time, but the characters are the same.
Yeah.
They keep being reinvented, or once you get that, then you're with it, right?
Yeah. Well, once you find the rhythm of the storytelling, and I don't think that it was very obvious in the first few episodes, but definitely by episode 5, you found they found, or at least I found what they were putting across.
Same here. And it's definitely worth giving a shot. Anyway, it's a great show.
And that exact sort of discussion is something like, okay, so when we're dealing with a text like that, how do we either avoid that, or is that something that we actively want to try to achieve, like keep the audience guessing until maybe halfway through the season?
Yeah.
And I think it's through comparison of the text that you are a fan of that is your first step to analyzing your own work.
Yes.
Because it's notoriously difficult to objectively analyze and break down your own work, because you know where it's come from, you know everything behind it, and viewing it objectively is difficult, just for the fact that you're not objective.
Exactly.
So viewing it through the lens of other texts that you know very well is a great first step to doing that.
Exactly. All right, so because it's a TV show, you can't put it on Letterboxd, but you do share with other people. Yeah. But do you go in and consume other medias around? Because I know there's, in the beginning of this Foundation show, there's an Apple podcast, I think, where people are discussing the show. Are you consuming that as well?
I
are you
tend
going
not to do that.
All right.
I like to consume media separate from promotional material around the media. So I don't like watching trailers. I don't like watching what is it called where the director's talking commentary?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. I like to consume media for myself, and then maybe if I'm really interested and really into it, I will go and consume that other sort of stuff.
Okay.
My particular brand of fandom is kind of saying, I really like this. I think you would really like it, and pushing it onto other people.
All right.
I'm a bad fan in that I'm not a fanatic. I won't consume. So that's the thing. Like, I'm a big fan of Isaac Asimov.
Yeah.
And I consumed his books way back when.
Really?
When I first started reading. So like maybe late primary and early high school.
Yeah.
And so I was trepidatious about the Foundation series, because it is a huge story that I just couldn't see working in a television format. And it is a little bit simplified, and it is a little bit arch still, but I can see that is how they have to tell the story.
Good.
And I think they are doing a decent job of it.
Right.
It is an adaptation, but it's still what it is. Yeah.
Good. So speaking of pushing things onto other people, right?
Yeah.
So I pushed we were playing a joke the other day, and I gave you a computer game that I like a lot. I pushed the game onto you, and you came in today, Monday morning, and you said,
"How dare you?
How dare you? This is so addictive. I couldn't sleep. I'm dreaming about it. It's so good, this game." So it's called Faster Than Light, or FTL. Yep. It's a very simple game, but a very ingenious game. So now you're going to go out and push that to other people? Is that what you're saying? Or
absolutely, the people that like that kind of game, I will definitely
say you got to
spread it through. Because it is an ingeniously designed game with huge replay value.
I played it for 6 years. And
I think that is what a game has to be to get me to be a fan of it, is be able to go back and play it again and again. There are a lot of really cinematic games like Mass Effect and whatever that have really intricate storylines, and I don't get into that kind of game.
Got it.
I like the kind of game where it is a game, where my brain has to switch into certain modes of thought and processing, and I engage with the game
solve
that
a
way.
problem. You got to solve a problem. And
Solve a problem rather
this
than
game,
consume a story.
Sorry if you're not a big fan of games, but this game forces you to solve problems right now.
Lots of problems
constantly.
all the time.
So it's called Faster Than Light, FTL. I'll put a link in the show notes. And you can play it on iPad or a PC or a Mac, but not on your phone because it requires more space, real estate on your screen.
Yeah.
All right. So nothing about computer games. Okay. All right. So in what made you want to talk about this? Is it because you want the fan to be a better consumer, or do you want the creator to have a better relationship with the fan?
Honestly, I'm interested in how creators interface with other texts.
Okay.
And how, because the top 3 list that we're doing today is like, what are the properties that you are a fan of?
Yeah.
Capital F, fan, hills that you will die on. Like, this is a good text, regardless of anything else that happens. This is what I'm a fan of.
I completely misunderstood that, but sure. As always, we've been very creative with our top 3. All right.
So I think when it comes to what I wanted to talk about, it is the discussion of how what you like in media affects your creativity in relation to media. So, like, obviously you're a film fan and you've worked in film. You've worked in film production. Yeah. How has the films that you are a fan of affected the work that you've done in film?
Well, of course, you are massively inspired. And the first director I worked with, who was also the writer, he was totally inspired. And for the first film, which is called The 18th, I've talked about that before, it was inspired by Robert Altman's, what was it called? Shortcuts? Yeah, it was called Shortcuts, it came out a couple of years before. He was massively inspired when he wrote that film. And the second film he wrote, which is called Possessed, I had seen a film called The Hidden, which is an 80s, 90s film with Kyle MacLachlan and is it Tom Byrne? I can't remember the other characters in the film, or the actors in the film, but I told him about that premise, that story, and based upon that, he went home and wrote a script which became Possessed. So he was totally inspired by that. I think we discussed this before. What is it? Great artists steal, right? I mean, it's and so I think as long as you're paying homage,
good artists borrow, great artists
that's true.
Steal.
Yeah. So you get inspired. You can see what other people do, and you got to check out. It's not the competition because Robert Altman and The Hidden was in completely different categories, but you can definitely be inspired by the works of other people.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. The number of filmmakers that I've spoken to who have said, in my film, I'm going to have this one long tracking shot because I've seen this used to such effect in other films. I'm like, that is a form of fan. Like, you are a fan of that cinematography and that choice and what it meant in the story. And you're trying to replicate that in your own text.
Exactly. So a famous shot, if anyone has seen the original Jaws with Steven Spielberg, there's this amazing shot in the film where I think it's the Roy Schneider. He's the guy on the beach looking out for the sharks, and there's a camera rolls towards him but also zooms in at the same time. It's a very special shot, and so many filmmakers have recreated that shot in other films because it was so iconic and so special. It's a little thing notice as a photographer, cinema photographer, maybe not as an audience, but it's a very special. Again, I'll find it in the show notes, maybe post a YouTube link so people can see how that one shot has been established in other films. Absolutely.
And so I think when we're talking about that, it is necessary to kind of delineate where being a fan ends and where being a creator starts. So figuring out how you're different to the media that you consume, so that you are not just replicating it or just like, this already exists in the world. Why do you need to make it? And that's something that is something that's plagued me for a long time, because I mean, I think I've spoken about it on this podcast before. The first creative writing I really did for myself was fan fiction. I wrote an X-Men story. It was original characters, but it referenced the universe and what have you. And that is how I kind of gauged my interest in creative writing and what I want to get across in a story. I'm not sure where that delineation is. I can't tell you, like, okay, you have to change it this much and not include this name or this concept before it is a new work rather than a referential work. Because like, I mean, the famous example is 50 Shades of Grey started as Twilight fan fiction, but it's not remembered as Twilight fan fiction, and it doesn't really reference the Twilight universe at all. So that's quite obviously a new text, and I think people are willing to accept it as a new text.
But of course, if you go in and write about X-Men and use original characters, there are some intellectual property issues, and you can't go out and sell that and make money on that because somebody else owns those characters.
If you make characters that are just different enough,
of course, like, different names and same capabilities, absolutely.
But in which case is that poor form rather than a creative expression? And I think that is something like like that old definition of art is like, I don't know how to define art, but I know when I see it. Or pornography, I don't know what it, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Isn't the film Underworld with Kate Beckinsale? Apparently there was a lawsuit and they settled out of court because they lifted so many. There was like 37 different. I'm just making a number up here. It's probably not this right now. But again, I'll put the link in the show notes. And so please correct me out there. Sorry. But there was a lot of stuff where the universe they built in Underworld, which is a very rich universe, was lifted up either a book or a game, I think it was. I can't remember what it was. But those people who created the original one say, hey, this is too much. All these incidents here, points that you've been inspired. And they had to settle out of court to release it and use it for all the rest of the film. So it's something like that. So let me ask you a question again. How about in fans inspiring the creatives, the artist?
Definitely that it works in that other way where like fans are going like, oh, it would be so cool if this character could do this.
Right. Thank you. That's where I'm going with my top 3. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
I think the more than ever with the amount of interaction that we have on the internet these days between creators and fans, that can get really incestuous really quickly.
Exactly.
Like the famous example is Supernatural, where there was 2 characters who were canonically not gay, but there was a huge fandom who shipped them together, who wanted them to get together, and they made it canonical at the very last episode, and then one of them died. It was kind of like, and that kind of interplay, like that wouldn't have happened if that fandom didn't push so hard for that. And then there were episodes where they were sent into a parallel universe that was our universe, where they were TV actors making the show about their own lives. And I was like, it got really confusing, and I was like, I didn't enjoy that as someone who was watching the show. That for me was too self-referential to be meaningful as a piece of media, because I felt like they were talking to people who weren't me.
Okay. I've not seen Supernatural, but it sounds a little bit like Lost, the TV show Lost. Where there was side stories, forward stories, and backward story. And at one point, they went into an alternative universe, and they were playing different characters and versions of themselves having different jobs.
Yeah. Yep.
So, which also is confusing for a lot of people. I remember that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think, but then there are great examples of that as well, where fans have interfaced with creators and like have actually inspired new work or new iterations of the same work or new stories. Comics do it all the time.
Okay.
Because they reboot at the drop of a hat. So they're like, yeah, sure, we'll just have one character be king of the world for now, and then we'll reboot later. So
from an artist's point of view, obviously if you are a company and you sell something to your consumers, onto the masses, you need to listen to your consumers. You need to listen to the people buy and consume your product, whatever you're making. But as an artist, are you obligated to listen to them, or should you not listen to them? Where's the fine line there?
I think it depends on the art that you're making.
Yeah.
I think if your art invites comment and interaction, like I think comic books do to such a degree that they do invite people to be actively involved in the stories and talk about the stories. Whereas I think things like cinema, not necessarily, because once a movie is made, it's made. But now we have the crossover of the MCU and the DCEU, where audience reaction to one text changes the entire direction of the next text.
Okay.
I think Star Wars is a great example of like the audience reaction to the 8th film totally changed. Like they got rid of the director, they they changed the storylines around, they rewrote the entire final episode of the series.
Yeah, it's true. I do think that you're saying that people don't participate, because I think that you could just go in and watch on Letterboxd, as you said, or any other website where people definitely will comment on IMDb, Rotten Potatoes. I think that films are, like any creative thing being happen, is out there to be judged.
Yeah.
And everybody's a critic, right? Everybody has their own opinion, which they are completely entitled to. And I think that creating something, unless you do creating only something for yourself in your own room and that's it, nobody, we as creatives, we are meant to be judged. We are meant to be critiqued.
Absolutely.
And it's hard.
I think there is a difference, though, between creating a piece of art to be presented as a piece of art and creating a piece of art that is then interfered with by fans. Because you can appreciate a piece of art, like I'm a fan of this piece of art, but then that's very different to writing a letter to the creator and going like, I liked your piece of art, but it could have been better if you did this, and this. And maybe in your next one, you should do that. I think there's a very big difference between appreciating a piece of art for what it is, whether you like it or not, and actively involving yourself in the creative process, which, whether or not like interaction with a creator is affecting the creative process. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think that is where we get to the concept of toxic fandom, where the fans feel entitled to a say over a product. Yeah. And that leads to a whole bunch of situations where no one is happy.
No one is happy. Yeah.
Because they're within fan. I'm in my head, I'm referring to Star Wars, where there's a bunch of different factions who like, we want things to change, but we also want it to be exactly the same. So please do that.
Okay, how many Death Stars have they blown up in those 9 films? A lot. Okay, and how many planets, how many bases, how many big ships have they blown up? I mean, it's the same formula.
So I think that is where I draw the line, because I am a fan of a lot of things, but I don't think I would ever see myself as interacting with, my top 3, because I have 3 properties in my top 3 that I would never feel I had the say to interact with the creator.
Let's talk about that top 3, as obviously I am gone a complete different direction than you, but that's fine. I guess we're very creative about our. If you haven't listened to this podcast before, what happens is we take turns coming up with a topic, and then we take turns saying, okay, these are the top 3 things. And I don't think at one point we've all got it right. We always miss.
We did share an answer a couple of times.
Oh yeah, we have. That's true. but mostly we either deliberately or non-deliberately are doing something
a different tack. Yeah.
Well, that's what being creative is all about.
Absolutely.
Right? So there's no wrong answers here. Okay. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Sure. So the first 2 of my top 3 are problematic.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of these things.
Yeah.
And they are not perfect.
Okay.
The creators are not perfect. The first one, I'll go Disney.
Yeah.
I, as a child in Australia, growing up at the time that I did, I was exposed to Disney, and Disney movies were kind of the go-to child entertainment. That hasn't really changed for me. I think Disney do put out a lot of quality work that has a lot of quality effect. I know that Disney is a bad company. Like they're purchasing everything, and like definitely now
they're dominating. They're
and through that dominance, they are enforcing a kind of cookie cutter approach to filmmaking, which I don't appreciate.
Okay, I agree with you. They're being, I wouldn't say monopolistic, because of course lots of other films comes out, but when you start owning Pixar, all the films that Pixar made, you start owning 20th Century Fox in their library, you have the Marvel universe, you got the Star Wars universe. I mean,
when a Disney movie comes out and you can pick each different plot point, because it's just the same rhythm told with different characters. Journey. It is the hero's journey, but it's like it's one particular aspect of the hero's journey isolated, and Disney knows that works. Yeah. And having gone to Disneyland, I think Disney does a great job of manufacturing this kind of like lighthearted happiness, nostalgia, that is in baked into the people who grew up with him as a child,
Yeah.
and kind of carrying that forward into the future in the way that it just kind of removes all anxiety. You don't have to worry about tragedy at an end of a Disney movie, because even if there is a tragedy at the end of the Disney movie, it's going to be heartwarming in some way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a fan of Disney, and I'm not a fan of the Disney company, but of the Disney texts, definitely pre 2015. I think I'm pretty almost all Disney movies. I would say I'm a fan of.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Disney is definitely something that has changed the way that I view text and storytelling.
But Disney, even of course the films are original, they're not really original. Of course, they've been inspired by someone else, right?
Yeah, so absolutely. Well,
Frozen,
all the big ones are based on fairy tales, which are hundreds of years old.
Yeah, so Hans Christian Andersen, Frozen is the Ice Queen, the Little Mermaid, and so forth and so forth. And all the different stories from different regions of the world is also inspired by local. Yeah. So they are going in and finding a story that resonates, that has proven its time.
But even the Ice Queen, like they took that story and then they Disneyfied it. Like the story totally. Is, and like Little Mermaid, horribly tragic tale, Disneyfied. So So exactly, that is again like Walt Disney was a fan of these stories, and so he took inspiration, and so that is something that will run through all three of my choices is texts that are based on the creator being a fan of something else.
Got it. All right.
Yeah, so definitely Disney.
All right. So I went a little different direction. Mm-hmm. I was more about the intersection between fan and an artist, how they can inspire one another.
Okay.
And how they can work with one another. And I got 3 examples here, and hopefully you're going to like them as well. So the first one is our great friend Fabio Saffaginini, I think his name is. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. You might not have heard of him, but he did something very unique. So he is Italian, living in a part of Italy, Cesena, I think it's called, and Cecina, I think it's called. And he was a big fan of Foo Fighters.
Okay.
Do you know where this is going now?
No.
So he's a huge fan of Foo Fighters, and he wants Foo Fighters to come and play where he lives, in his town. And so he comes up with this idea of getting 1,000 musicians to play one song for Foo Fighters.
Okay.
Learning to Fly. And you're not familiar with this?
I have heard of this story now, yeah.
Yeah, yep. Okay. So he goes in and he spends a year, every day he's just working on this project to play this one song with 1,000 musicians who come from all over Italy. And to make this video and send that to the Foo Fighters to tell them to come. And of course they respond, and of course they come and play. And Fabio becomes his hero in his own little story. Yeah, he gets up at the stage at the concert, and it's just things like that where people spend time, energy, and money and resources doing something they're a fan of. It restores my faith in humanity. It does.
Absolutely.
It's inspiring. I get a tear in my eye. I think it's amazing. And getting 1,000 people to sing and play drums and playing guitar. If you haven't seen the video, I'll put a link in the show notes. It's amazing. It's touching. It's moving. And Fabio is just a big fan of Foo Fighters. And they showed up.
Absolutely. And so that's a great example of fan service.
Exactly. Yeah. So I love this. And I think it was seen by 58 million times. There's a YouTube video, at least the clip I just found today. But I love that interaction between a fan, because if you are the Foo Fighters, obviously you are superstardom, right? You are the 1%ers in the music industry because you're touring, you're making lots of money, right? And then this small region in Italy, how do you reach? How do you get through them? Well, you do something creatively that inspires them, that they will notice. Like he says, Fabio says, we know a lot of people will watch this, but I only made this video for 5 people. Yeah. And this, of course, the members of Foo Fighters, right? Anyway, that interaction, that inspires me. I was just very happy about that. So,
absolutely. And that's a great way. Like, obviously, he's not, or maybe he is a musician, but he's like, just playing a song and covering it isn't going to get the attention.
Sitting at home with a guitar and crooning your heart out to Dave Grohl is not going to cut it. But this did, and he went viral around the world, as it should. So amazing story. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My second pick is Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
I
Your go-to
like
guy.
all but one of his movies. Well, I love all but one of his movies.
Yeah. It's Hateful Eight you don't like, right? Is it?
No, it's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And like I forgive him the gratuitous feet shots. I forgive him the questionable use of accents and slurs, because the stories that he tells are so well crafted.
Yes.
And he is so in tune with the text that he is referencing and that he is a fan of, that he is pulling into his own work.
Yeah.
My favorite of these is Kill Bill 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And that both of those movies are just references with original characters in a script.
Yeah.
It is something that I've never seen anyone else do to the same degree of mastery.
Yeah.
That being said, I don't think Quentin Tarantino is a particularly good person, or that I would particularly get along with him if we met each other. But I think his work, aside from that, is really, really at the pinnacle of what it could be.
What's amazing about him from a Hollywood point of view is that he managed to make original independent film, which is very hard these days in a MC Marvel universe, right? But he managed to make, when I say independent, I do with, I mean, it's not really independent, but it is, because it's independent storytelling, but it still maximizes box office. It's a very, very hard thing to do, because if you normally make an independent film, and I don't mean independent in the studios, because of course he's got the backing of the studios, but what they allow him to get away with, no one else would get allowed to.
No one has the control that he does over the film.
So he's allowed to do stuff that no one else does, and he still delivers box office results, which is amazing. So it's a testament to that you can be original. You have to fight your way to get there. But once he did Reservoir Dogs, which is his first film, and then after that was what was it? What he made after that?
Pulp Fiction.
Was that the second one?
No, I think Jackie Brown, then Pulp Fiction.
Okay, and then because once he hit those films, and again Reservoir Dogs, it was so different and so obviously very Japanese inspired by all and Hong Kong films and what's his name out of Hong Kong, the director? Oh, I can't remember right now. That's a little bit embarrassing. Anyway, he's very inspired by them, and he goes and pulls this thing off. And so it is testament that it is possible, but it's very, very hard. I mean, 99.9% people don't do it, but he did it, and that's impressive. So
I think that's the thing. Like, Tarantino had the talent and the opportunity to showcase the talent, and then the verisimilitude to stick to his guns to make it. And then once he had that reputation, he could leverage that ongoing.
He still had to go and convince producer, investors, and because Reservoir Dogs, although it was shot on very low budget, it still had to be made and still had to be pulled together, and he did. And so,
and he had to sell scripts before that, and he had to compromise, because he wanted to direct and whatever, and he couldn't do it. So I think Tarantino, the texts of Tarantino are one of the things that I will die on hill.
Yeah, that's good, man. My second is a guy called Marc Rebillet. I think I've talked to you before. Marc Rebillet is a little bit of a YouTube mini star. He is a American, but he got a French last name, Rebillet. That's how I pronounce it. And he has amazing fan interaction. So he creates songs right there on the spot, right in front of you. And he goes and does concert. He did before the pandemic. Yeah. And I'll link to one called Amsterdam, where he's in it. He's got a very crazy style. He will pee in a bathrobe, only wear underwear. He will come with obscene remarks and do funny stuff. But he's inspired by the audience, and the audience will shout him a word or a text or a scene, and he'll create a song around that. Yeah. So he takes fans who show up to see him be creative, create something on the spot. He takes their words and he turns it into a song. Yeah. And it's so simple, but so powerful and so moving. And he's a phenomenal musician. And he basically has a keyboard, and he's able to replicate any sound and create any instrument with his keyboard. He just makes amazing things. I'll if you're not a fan now, you will be afterwards. I'll link a couple of YouTube videos to. He is amazing. I really like him.
YouTube is an amazing phenomenon because you are constantly interacting with fans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so during the pandemic, he had these shows where people would call in and give him words, and then he would make music because he just needs to create all the time.
Yeah.
And lately, he's been having these people over who just come and rap with him or sing with him, and they came up with this just on the spot. These amazing songs you think he's recorded in a studio, who's taking months, but they come up with on the spot. It is phenomenal. He is. I'm very inspired by him. I'm not a musician myself, but it's just amazing to see that interaction between fan and an artist who's blowing up on YouTube.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My final one, which is a writer who definitely could be argued is writing fan fiction about mythology, and it's Neil Gaiman. So he wrote American Gods.
Yes.
He's also done Sandman and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
But Neil Gaiman is one of my idols in a creative sense, in that he engages with fans in a very wholesome and meaningful way without ever making it feel like he's pandering to an audience. Like his texts feel well thought through and have a very distinct flavor of his own writing, while still reaching out to an audience that is not in a way of them influencing how he writes. So I'm a big fan of Neil Gaiman, and in particular his books American Gods, but big fan of Sandman as well. And most of his stuff is referencing folklore or mythology that has come before, and he's reimagining that in some sort of way.
I've never read him. I should check him out.
Yeah, I highly recommend. Yeah.
All right, I'll definitely put the links in the show notes.
Yep.
All right, good.
Well, it has been made into a TV show as well, which is fairly true to the books early on, but
Is that
away.
the Amazon show?
Yes. Yep.
With what's the two characters? Oh, Michael Sheen and the former Doctor Who. What's his name?
I'm not sure that it's the same thing.
Are we talking about something else? I'm talking about a different show.
No,
maybe. Yeah. Sorry, I'm confused here. We'll put it in the show notes.
Put it in the show notes, and you can go there to check what. So what is your final interaction?
So my final one, staying on that path between the fan and an artist, is the interaction is a tool that was invented about 10 years ago. I think it is now. It's Patreon. I just think you should give shout out to Patreon. That it's giving a vehicle to support independent artists, to give them money for the work they do, or for artists who are struggling to go out and say, hey, support me in what I do. And this is the reason why you should support me. Just don't ask for money, but say, if you give me this kind of money, I can do this and that. I mean, you explain why it's important to support, do not just ask for money. But
it is the best case scenario of microtransaction.
Yes.
Which is like,
I
can't afford to buy a $30 product from you every month, but I can afford $1.
Yeah.
And
if $5 or $10,
if 1,000 people give $1,000 a month, then I'm assured that you're going to continue creating.
So I just want to shout out to Patreon. I think it's great what they're doing, and I love that service exists, and it's good for artists and fans. So
and it has inspired a whole bunch of other different services that are along the same lines but have different things. So like coffee and what have you. But absolutely. Patreon kind of revolutionized the maker market, the creator market. Yeah,
exactly. All right.
Awesome. That's it.
It's always been, I think it is. As always, if you like this, please give us a 5-star review. Put a comment in if you are on some of the podcasts where you can. We have an email address, it's in the show notes, and we also have a Facebook page now. You go in there, we post the pictures, and we post the episodes there. And we took some pictures the other day of us so people can see what we look like.
Yep.
So we're going to put them.
I smiled for it.
Thank you very much. I'll put some pictures up because it's always funny if you listen to someone and at one point you're going to go, what do they look like? I mean, I don't know if somebody's out there listening to this, but it's like, what do people look like? So I always have to find out at some point if I start listening to someone for a long time. So.
Yeah, I don't think I look like what I sound like.
Same here. Do I? I don't know. Nobody does.
But I would like to know what your favorite fan fictions are.
Yes.
Or what your favorite text that is inspired by something else is by another text.
Or how you've seen fan contribute to creativity between fan and artist. I like that space there. So,
yeah. What's your favorite fan service moment?
Thank you. Saying it's always a pleasure.
Next time.